Radiomaster have just released their new ER series of ExpressLRS receivers that are specifically designed for plane, boat or ground-based applications. These receivers have some specific features, including that they are all PWM based, they have built-in battery sensors, and some of them even have a Vario sensor as well. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through the differences between the different models, talking about their features and specs, and then at the end, I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts. Now, just to be clear up front, Radiomaster did send me all of these receivers for free. However, they have not paid me to make this video, and as always, my thoughts are entirely my own. Furthermore, I just want to say I'm actually going to be giving away some of these receivers because I will not need them, and if you're interested in possibly being able to get one, please do make sure you are a member of my Discord, because I'm going to be explaining on there how I'm going to do it. Some of them will be going to users on my Discord, and some of them will be going to Patreons as well, so please do check out the link to my Discord and Patreon in the description of this video. Anyway, let's get on with it and let's take a closer look at these new receivers. Okay, so the ER series is a new set of ExpressLRS receivers specifically designed for fixed wing use. We've got 6 models here, but there's also a 7th ER4 model as well, which we'll take a look at in a minute. They are all PWM receivers, and the differences between these is some are designed for plane use, so you've got the ER6, the ER8, which is 6 PWM and 8 PWM. We've then got the ER6G and ER8G, which are again 6 and 8 PWM, but they are glider specific models. And there are also then an ER6GV and an ER8GV, which are glider models with a built-in Vario sensor as well. So what they're doing is giving you the option of either having a glider model with a Vario or without, giving you the option for both. Now, they are all specifically PWM receivers, but they do have some nice features built in for fixed wing applications, including they're all HV capable for high voltage servos, and they have dedicated battery inputs as well for measuring the voltage. And the idea of these is to give you a receiver to be able to fly without the use of a flight controller. Taking a look at the ER4, 6 and 8 first of all. Now these are more traditional receivers. The ER6 and ER8 are box style receivers, and we'll take a look at them in a second. And then the ER4 is a smaller receiver which is just covered in heat shrink tubing. What you've got is 4 PWM outputs on the front there via servo headers. We've got a single antenna, and then there's a dedicated solder pad on the back for connecting your battery voltage so you get your readout via the telemetry. This is the more basic receiver that you get for the system, and then you get the larger two, which is the ER6 and the ER8, which are identical feature wise. The only difference is the amount of PWM outputs. Looking at the ER8 first of all, if we go in, you can see inside it comes packaged. It has this like plastic cover over the top to keep everything in place. You then have the receiver itself held in place with that little bit of Velcro, and then in the bottom they include this little wiring harness as well as a quick card showing you how to get to the setup guide and information. Now the receiver itself, as I've said, is a more traditional box style receiver. So we've got our PWM ports down here, our servo outputs. We've got a battery port down here as well, so that's where you can connect it directly to your battery. We've got our boot button up here. We've got 2 antennas on this one here, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. We've then got our external voltage here, as well as an external UART connection, allowing you to plug in additional sensors such as a Vario or something else, because this one doesn't have one built in. Now on this, as I said just now, we've got our 8 servo headers and the bat. The bat is obviously the power for the servo rail. That isn't measuring the power that you have for the battery voltage, and that's why it has that dedicated port on the back there. Now, as I mentioned, there are 2 antennas on this, and it has antenna diversity. However, it is not full receiver diversity like we've seen on some of the ExpressLRS receivers. It doesn't have 2 full RF front ends. It's diversity via antenna like we've seen in the past on other receivers, and that's just going to help improve the overall performance. You've then got the antenna cables which come off, and then they're covered in a little bit of plastic at the side as well, offering a little bit of additional protection. Now, spec-wise, the size of this is 43 by 30 by 15 mil, and it weighs 17.5 grams. It has a battery detection range of 4 volts to 35 volts, and it has a maximum ExpressLRS telemetry power of 100 milliwatts, so it does have that built-in power amplifier as well. As I've said, it's got 8 channels of PWM, and it supports a power range on that of 4.5 to 8.4 volts too, and it has that dual antenna diversity, but it is not that full RF diversity like we've seen released on some ExpressLRS receivers. Now, the ER6 version is basically identical. I'm not going to show that in this video. It's just 6 PWM outputs instead of 8. And then, as I've said, we've got the ER4 version here as well. If we open this one up, you will see that it is a little bit different in the sense of it isn't actually in a solid plastic casing. Instead, what we have is the receiver itself in heat shrink tubing. We've got our PWM outputs down there. We've got a small solder pad down there for the external voltage reading as well, but there isn't a UART input on this one allowing you to use it with external sensors. What you've got is just your PWM port 1, 3, 4, and 2, but if you're using this one, you're going to have to power those servos separately. And actually, this one, whilst I did say at the start is designed for fixed wing applications, you'll find the ER4 is ideal for basic fixed wing, but really cars, boats, any ground-based application as well. And that is the same with the ER8. ER6, you can use these in cars and boats, but these ones are more aimed at larger fixed wing use. Now, just covering off the spec on the ER4, what we have here is a 30 by 15 by 5 mil receiver, and it weighs just 3 grams. Again, it has the voltage detection range of 4 to 35 volts, servo range of 4.5 to 8.4 volts, but this one only has a telemetry power of 10 milliwatts. It is much lower than the other ones that you're going to see later on in this video. And again, this one really is designed for car, ground, any use where you don't need that telemetry power, you don't need all of those servo outputs, and you want a really small receiver that you can pack into a tight space. Next, we're moving over to the ER6G. Now, this is a dual antenna version, just like the ER6 and the ER8, but this one has been specifically designed for glider applications, and that's why it's set up this way, lighter and a slightly different layout to the pin headers, meaning it's just a bit easier to fit in your aircraft. Taking a look inside, again, you'll find the receiver is housed under this plastic top panel. It's then held in place with the little rubber band, and then if we flick it up, we simply just then get a wiring harness with a pin header, and again a card, if I can pick it up, showing you where to get support for the manuals and the configuration. Okay, so looking at the ER6G, as I said, this one is designed for glider use. What we've got is our 5 channels at the front here, so they're on 3-pin headers, and then our 6th channel is hiding at the back here. That is why they include this little header and wire in the kit. That is used to allow you to use the 6th channel if you need it, and then there's a little pad down here for your external voltage battery input if you want to use it. Again, there's no dedicated battery input for the servo header on this one, so you're going to have to power them separately, but you do have your dual antenna setup here as well. And again, on this receiver, there's no UART option. It is simply the 6 outputs and the battery input. Spec-wise, this receiver weighs 5 grams. It has dimensions of 42 by 13 by 8 and supports 6 PWM channels, as I've said. And it again has that battery voltage input reading range from 4 to 35 volts. It supports a DC power supply of 3.5 to 8.4 volts at the front as well. And as I've said, you're going to need to configure that separately because there's no dedicated header input. Now, this one has a maximum return power of 50 milliwatts, so it's not the 100 milliwatts like we saw on the larger models, but it is still higher than the standard output, which is about 16 milliwatts on the normal receivers. Next is the ER8G. Now, again, this is similar to the other one. Let me just get it out of the box. However, it is a different setup. As you can see, what we have is 5 channels for the PWM on this side here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have 6, 7, 8, and then there is a battery input header next to channel 8 on this one, so you can plug in your BEC or your power supply directly to the receiver. We then have our external voltage pad down there if you want to solder to that to give you battery voltage, and then we've got our 2 antenna inputs over here, exactly the same on the others. There is on this one as well a UART input, so again allowing you to attach external sensors if you wanted to. This one supports a voltage input range just like the last one of 3.5 to 8.4 volts, and again supporting up to that 35 volt max on the voltage input down here. And this one has been specifically designed for glider use. It's got that long setup allowing you to have your servos one side, your servos the other, your motor, etc., and just making installation overall a little bit easier. Now, size and weight wise, this one is 60 by 13.5 by 13 and it weighs 10.5 grams. And again, this one supports the full 100 milliwatts telemetry power back to your ground end. Finally then, we have our two Variometer models. Now we have the ER6 GV and ER8 GV. And again, these are identical layout to the last two you saw. What they are though is the models with the built-in Vario sensor. Now what we'll do is take a look at this one first of all. Okay, so it's basically identical to the ER6. The only difference on this one is that it does have that Vario sensor built in. We've got our 5 headers on this side here. We've got our 6th down here. There is no dedicated voltage input for the headers. So again, you're going to have to wire that separately, but you do have that voltage input sensor over here. This one supports the output of 100 milliwatts. It also has that 4 to 35 volt sensing down here. And again, 3.5 to 8.4 volts support on the servo header over here, dual antennas, and really just giving you all of the options of the first one, but with that sensor built in. But there's no UART sensor on this one, so if you did want to add anything else, you're going to need to go with the other model. Okay, just looking at the ER8 GV. Now this is basically identical to the ER8G we saw earlier. So we've got our 5 PWMs on this side, 6, 7 and 8, a dedicated battery input for the servos. We've got our voltage input over here if you want it as well there. You've got a UART port on this one for external sensors if you want it, our dual antennas, and it has that Vario sensor built in, supports the 100 milliwatts ExpressLRS. So really, when you look at these, you really have to make a decision on these if you want the Vario sensor or not, and which shape or which size you want, depending on your PWM output as well. If you're going to need more than 6, you're obviously going to have to go with the 8. But if you're sitting at 5 or 6, then the 6 will probably get you through. Now, with regards to actually configuring these receivers and then obviously binding them to your radio, Radiomaster recommend doing it via the Wi-Fi configuration. There are multiple ways in ExpressLRS you can bind and update the firmware, and whilst I'm not going to go over all of them in the video, I am going to walk you through the process of connecting these receivers to an ExpressLRS radio. We're using a TX16S here, which is a version 1, and I've got a Ranger module in the back from Radiomaster as well, and I've got this running the latest firmware. So what we're going to do is get this powered up, and then I'll show you the simplest way to be able to configure this. Now the radio side has already been pre-flashed with the correct version of ExpressLRS 3.2.1, and I've already put my binding phrase in that as well. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this, but that is already done. But there are other videos out there on setting up ExpressLRS, and I even have some on that subject myself. Now, because these receivers are PWM, you're not going to have that usual Betaflight pass-through or iNav or any of those other options that you would have, because it isn't connecting via UART. So we're going to need to do it via Wi-Fi. I'm going to power the receiver with this little 5-volt BEC for the purpose of this video. For you, you may be putting it into your build, or you may be powering it on a BEC as well, whichever one you want to do it on. What I'm going to do is simply plug that in there, making sure that we've got the pin out correct, and then we will power it up with a battery. You will see that it will actually start to boot. We'll get the LED flash, the colors down there, and then it starts to flash, and that is the usual double flash you get when a receiver for ExpressLRS hasn't been configured. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is just wait for it to enter the Wi-Fi mode. Now, that will be shown by this LED moving to a very fast flash. That will usually take around 20 seconds to happen, and when it does, you'll see that the LED will change. Okay, so you can now see the LED has changed from the double flashing green to a new sort of color changing amber and red. Now this is different to what you usually see on most ExpressLRS receivers. That is because this has a color changing LED. Usually you would get a rapid flash on that green LED, but instead it's showing us this multiple colors. On my computer, I'm then going to go into my Wi-Fi settings, and as I've got a Wi-Fi adapter built into this, we're then going to look, and you can now see that an ExpressLRS receiver is showing down here on the side, and I'm going to connect to that. Now, if you've never done this before, you will need to put the password in. There is a generic password on this on ExpressLRS, and this is shown on the ExpressLRS website. Once connected, I'm then going to go to the web page 10.0.0.1, and that'll take us to the home page for the web interface on the receiver. Here, you can see all of the information. We've got the current model, we've got the current firmware version, and then we've got the options down here, including where we would put our binding phrase. Under here, you can also do other things such as configure the Wi-Fi. You have the options to select model match and update the firmware as well. But today, we're simply going to do the binding phrase. Before I do that though, I am just going to check something, and that is that model match is turned off. I have come across some receivers that have had model match turned on as standard. These have usually not been from Radiomaster, but before I put my binding phrase in, this is something I always check. Once you've put your binding phrase in and it's the same as what you've got in your transmitter, you then simply select save and reboot. Now that's done, if we power it up, it should now connect to my radio.
Telemetry recovered.
And there we go. So what we're going to do next is just take a look at the ExpressLRS settings, as well as a quick look at what we're getting on the telemetry screen so you can see the output from this receiver. So on the telemetry screen, I'm going to make sure that it detects all of the telemetry sensors that are available on this receiver. It's done that to 13. I'm going to click stop, and if we scroll up, we can then go up to number 0, which should be the top, and that's got our altitude. That's from our built-in Vario sensor. So for instance, if I just pick this up and move it to the floor, you will then see that reading change, gone to minus 0.6, and if I move it up, there you go. You can see that altitude measurement is reading directly from the receiver as I move it up and down. We've then got all our other telemetry options as well. So we've got RSSI 1 and 2, receiver quality, signal to noise, antenna. And if we scroll down, you will see sensor 11 is RXBT, and that is currently the receiver battery. Now, the way these receivers actually work is, as I mentioned earlier, if I just bring it back in, you've got a dedicated pad that you can solder to here if you want to be able to measure your battery voltage directly. However, if you don't have anything connected, it will default to showing you the voltage on the servo input. So at the moment, it's showing 5 volt because that's what we're getting on the servo input. However, if we did attach a wire there, it would then kick in and show us the voltage, and then you'd have the ability to go in and calibrate that if you needed to. So you could go in and then you could manually calibrate it here to the correct readout as well. Now, one other thing I just want to mention is with regards to that UR input. As I've said, there's going to be additional sensors available for these in the future. There's going to be a GPS module, there's going to be an external Vario sensor, as well as a combined voltage and current sensor available too. And it's really good to see Radiomaster building up an ecosystem around these receivers. Whilst we've seen things like that on other brands, we haven't had that in ExpressLRS today, and it's really going to help push ExpressLRS forward in the fixed wing community. We've got high quality radios, high quality receivers, and those additional sensors as well. And you're going to see a lot more people moving onto this as time goes on. And again, it's bringing the fight to the likes of FR Sky and others who have had a dominance in that area. Now, something I do just want to mention on all of these receivers before we talk about pricing is the fact that they come ready to go out of the box. They do have ExpressLRS pre-installed, and you do not need to update that to use them. You can simply connect them up, bind them to your radio, and you will all be ready to go. The only thing you do need to make sure is that you do have the version 3 ExpressLRS Lua script installed. Now, price-wise, they all come in different depending on the features. The ER4, which is 4 PWMs, and as I mentioned, ideal for boats, cars, could use it in planes, that is $14.99. We've then got the ER6 coming in at $24.99, and the ER8 coming in at $34.99. We've then got the ER6G, which is designed for gliders. That is coming in at $29.99. The ER8G is coming in at $34.99. And then the ER6GV with the Vario sensor, $34.99. And the ER8GV coming in at $39.99. The most expensive receiver is under $40, and I think you're getting a huge amount here for your money, especially for fixed wing, glider, and even car applications. And if you're interested in getting these, there will be a link to them in the description. Okay, so to share with you my thoughts on these new receivers. Now, just to be completely clear, as I said at the start, I was sent these for free. I've been doing bench testing with them, but I haven't done any flying. I am not a fixed wing expert or a glider expert, that is for sure. But what I can say is it's good to see Radiomaster continuing to develop what they're doing in ExpressLRS. What we've got here is more high quality receivers, proper PWM, antenna diversity on many of them. We've got options like that UR input for additional sensors, the battery voltage input, and the Vario sensor if you want that as well. And if you're looking to build ExpressLRS into your fixed wing, your plane, your boat, your rover, these are absolutely going to be well worth a look. Now, if you're interested in getting these, there is a link to them in the description. It is an affiliate link though. Radiomaster is one of the only companies I use affiliate links with, simply because of their products are so good. They are a brand I absolutely trust. And if you're interested in getting a set, please do consider checking it out. Furthermore, as I said, because I will not use many of these receivers, I am going to be giving the majority of these away. Please do make sure you check out the link to my Patreon as well as my Discord server in the description. I'll be sharing these between the Discord and the Patreon. More will go to Patreon than Discord, but if you are interested in maybe getting one of these, please do consider checking out those links. If you'd like to support the channel to allow us to keep making content like this in the future as well, please do check out that link to Patreon. I want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patrons. I would not be able to do this without your support. Anyway, that's it on this one. I hope you found it useful. Please do let me know what you think. Stay safe. I'll speak to you soon.